where there is will and overplus. Like John O'Gaunt, his name is dear to him, as dear as the coat and crest he toadied for, on a bend sable or spear or steeled argent, honorific abilitudinatibus. Dearer than his glory of greatest Shakespeare in the country. What's in a name? That is what we ask ourselves in childhood when we write the name that we are told is ours. A star, a day star, a fire drake, rose at his birth. It shone by day, in the heavens alone, brighter than Venus in the night, and by night it shone over Delta and Cassiopeia. The recumbent constellation, which is the signature of his initial among the stars, his eyes watched it, lolling on the horizon, eastward of the Bear, as he walked on by the slumberous summer fields at midnight, returning from Shottery and from her arms. Both satisfied, I too. Don't tell them he was 9 years old when it was quenched. And from her arms. Wait to be wooed and won, I, meacock, who will woo you? Read the skies. Aro timerumenos bus Stephanos menos. Where's your configuration, Stephan? Stephan, cut the bread even. Sua donna, già di lui gelindo resolve di non amare. What is that, Mr. Daedalus? The Quaker librarian asked. Was it a celestial phenomenon? A star by night, Stephan said, a pillar of the cloud by day. What's more to speak? Stephan looked on his hat, his stick, his boots. Stephanos, my crown, my sword. His boots are spoiling the shape of my feet. Buy a pair, holes in my socks, handkerchief too. You make good use of the name, John Eglinton allowed. Your own name is strange enough. I suppose it explains your fantastical humor. Me, Maggie, and Mulligan. Fabulous artificer, the hawk-like man, you flew. Where to? New Haven, Dieppe, steerage passenger. Paris and back, Lapwing, Icarus, Peter 8. Sea bedabbled, fallen, weltering, Lapwing you are. Lapwing be. Mr. Best, eager quietly, lifted his book to say, That's very interesting, because that brother motive, don't you know? We find also in the old Irish myths just what you say, the three brothers Shakespeare, and Grimm too, don't you know, the fairy tales? The third brother that always marries the sleeping beauty and wins the prize. Best of best brothers, good, better, best. The Quaker librarian spring-halted near. I should like to know, he said, which brother you? I understand you to suggest there was a misconduct with one of the brothers, but perhaps I am anticipating? He caught himself in the act, looked at all, refrained. An attendant from the doorway called, Mr. Leicester, Father Deneen wants... Oh, Father Deneen, directly. Swiftly, rectly, creaking, rectly, he was rectly gone. John Eglinton touched the foil. Come, he said, let us hear what you have to say of Richard and Edmund. You kept them for the last, didn't you? I'm asking you to remember those two noble kinsmen, Nuncle Richie and Nuncle Edmund, Stephan answered. I feel I'm asking too much, perhaps. A brother is as easily forgotten as an umbrella. Lapwing, where is your brother? Apothecary's Hall? My Whetstone? Him, then Cranley? Mulligan? Now these, speech, but act, speech. They mock to try you, act, be acted on. Lapwing, I am tired of my voice, the voice of a sow, my kingdom for a drink. On. You will say those names were already in the chronicles from which he took the stuff of his plays. Why did he take them rather than others? Richard, a whore's son, Crookback, begotten, makes love to a widowed Anne. What's in a name? Woos and wins her, a whore's son, merry widow. Richard the Conqueror, third brother, came after William the Conquered. The other 4 acts of that play hang limply from that first. Of all his kings, Richard is the only king unshielded by Shakespeare's reverence, the angel of the world. Why is the underplot of King Lear, in which Edmund figures, lifted out of the Sidney's Arcadia and spatchcocked onto a Celtic legend older than history? That was Will's way, John Eglinton defended. We should not now combine a Norse saga with the excerpt of a novel by George Meredith. Que voulez-vous? Moore would say. He puts Bohemia on the seacoast and makes Ulysses quote Aristotle. Why? Stephan answered himself, because the theme of the false or the usurping or the adulterous brother, or all three in one, is to Shakespeare what the poor are not always with him. The note of banishment, banishment from the heart, banishment from the home, sounds uninterruptedly from the 2 gentlemen of Verona, onward till Prospero breaks his staff, buries it certain fathoms in the earth, and drowns his book. It doubles itself in the middle of his life, reflects itself in another, repeats itself. Protasis, epitasis, catastasis, catastrophe. It repeats itself again when he is near the grave, when his married daughter Susan, chip off the old block, is accused of adultery. But it was the original sin that darkened his understanding, weakened his will, and left him in a strong inclination to evil. The words are those of my lord's bishops of Maynooth, an original sin, and like original sin, committed by another in whose sin he too has sinned. It is between the lines of his last written words. It is petrified on his tombstone, under which her 4 bones are not to be laid. Age has not withered it, beauty and peace have not done it away. It is an infinite variety everywhere in the world he has created. In Much Ado About Nothing, twice in As You Like It, in The Tempest, in Hamlet, in Measure for Measure, and in all the other plays which I have not read. He laughed to free his mind from his mind's bondage. Judge Eglinton summed up. The truth is midway, he affirmed. He is the ghost and prince. He is all in all. He is, Stephen said. The boy of Act 1 is the mature man of Act 5. All in all. In Cymbeline, in Othello, he is bought and cuckolded. He acts and is acted on, lover of an ideal or a perversion. Like Jose, he kills the real Carmen. His unremitting intellect is the horn-mad Iago ceaselessly willing that the more in him shall suffer. Cuckoo, cuckoo, Cuck Mulligan clucked lewdly, O word of fear. Dark dome received, reverbed. And what a character is Iago! Undaunted, John Eglinton exclaimed. When all is said, Dumas fils, or is it Dumas Pierre, is right? After God, Shakespeare has created most. Man delights him not, nor woman neither, Stephen said. He returns after a life of absence to that spot of earth where he was born, where he's always been, man and boy, a silent witness, and there his journey of life ended. He plants his mulberry tree in the earth, then dies. The motion is ended. Gravediggers bury Hamlet Pierre, and Hamlet fills. A king and a prince at last in death with incidental music, and what though murdered and betrayed be wept by all frail tender hearts for? Dane or Dubliner, sorrow for the dead is the only husband from whom they refuse to be divorced. If you like the epilogue, look long on it. Prosperous Prospero, the good man rewarded, Lizzie, Grandpa's lump of love, and Nuncle Richie, the bad man taken off by poetic justice to the place where the bad niggers go. Strong curtain, he found in the world without as actual what was in his world within as possible. Maeterlinck says, if Socrates leaves his house today, he will find the sage seated on his doorstep. If Judas go forth tonight, it is to Judas his steps will tend. Every life is many days, day after day, we walk through ourselves, meeting robbers, ghosts, giants, old men, young men, wives, widows, brothers in love, but always meeting ourselves. The playwright, who wrote the folio of this world and wrote it badly, he gave us light first and the sun 2 days later, the Lord of things, as they are whom the most Roman of Catholics call Dio Boa. Hangman God is doubtless all in all of us, ostler and butcher, and would be bought and cuckolded too, but that in the economy of heaven foretold by Hamlet there are no more marriages, glorified man, an androgynous angel, being a wife unto himself. Eureka! Buck Mulligan cried. Eureka! Suddenly happyed, he jumped up and reached in a stride John Eglinton's desk. May I? He said. The Lord has spoken to Malachi. He began to scribble on a slip of paper. Take some slips from the counter going out. Those who are married, Mr. Best, Deuce Harold said, all save one shall live, the rest shall keep as they are. He laughed, unmarried, at Eglinton Johannes, of arts a bachelor. Unwed, unfancied, ware of wiles, they finger-pondered nightly, each his verorium edition of the taming of the shrew. You're a delusion, said roundly John Eglinton to Stephen. You have brought us all this way to show us a French triangle. Do you believe your own theory? No, said Stephen promptly. Are you going to write it? Mr. Best asked. You ought to make it a dialogue, don't you know, like the Platonic dialogues Wilde wrote. John Electicon doubly smiled. Well, in that case, he said, I don't see why you should expect payment for it since you don't believe it yourself. Dowden believes there is some mystery in Hamlet, but will say no more. Herr bleibt treu. The man Piper met in Berlin, who is working up that Rutland theory, believes that the secret is hidden in the Stratford Monument. He's going to visit the present Duke, Piper says, and prove to him that his ancestor wrote the plays. It will come as a surprise to his grace, but he believes his theory. I believe, O Lord, help my unbelief. That is, help me to believe or help me to unbelieve. Who helps to believe? Egaman. Who to unbelieve, other chap? You are the only contributor to Dana who asked for pieces of silver. Then I don't know about the next number. Fred Ryan wants space for an article on economics. Friedrin, 2 pieces of silver he lent me, tied you over, economics. For a guinea, Stephen said, you can publish this interview. Buck Mulligan stood up from his laughing scribbling, laughing and then gravely said, honeying malice, I called upon the bard Kinch at his summer residence in Upper Mecklenburg Street, and found him deep in the study of the Summa Contra Gentiles, in the company of 2 gonorrheal ladies, Fresh Nelly and Rosalie, the Colquay whore. He broke away. Come, Kinch, come, wandering Angus of the birds, come, Kinch, you have eaten all we left. Aye, I will serve you your orts and offals. Stephen rose. Life is many days, this will end. We shall see you tonight, John Eglinton said. Notre Ami, Moore says. Malachi Mulligan must be there. Buck Mulligan flaunted his slip in Panama. Monsieur Moore, he said, lecturer on French letters to the youth of Ireland. I'll be there. Come, Finch, the bards must drink. Can you walk straight? Laughing, he swill till 11, Irish night's entertainment. Lubber. Stephen followed a lubber. One day in the National Library we had a discussion. Shakes after, his lub back. I followed, I gall as kib. Stephen, greeting, then all amort, followed a lubber, jester, a well-kempt head, new barbered, out of the vaulted cell into a shattering daylight of no thought. What have I learned? Of them, of me? Walk like Haynes now. The constant reader's room, in the reader's book, Cashel, Boyle, O'Connor, Fitzmaurice, Tisdale, Farrell, Paraphs, his polysyllables. Item, was Hamlet mad? The Quakers pate godlily with a priestine and book talk. Oh, please do, sir, I shall be most pleased. Amused, Buck Mulligan mused in pleasant murmur with himself, self-nodding. A pleased bottom. The turnstile. Is that? Blue-ribboned hat, idly riding. What? Looked? The curving balustrade, smooth sliding Mencius. Puck Mulligan, Panama helmeted, went step by step, iambing, trolling. John Eglinton, my Joe, John, why won't you wed a wife? He spluttered to the air. Oh, the chinless Chinaman, Chin Chong Eglinton. We went over to their playbox, Haynes and I, the plumber's hall. Our players are creating a new art for Europe like the Greeks or Maeterlinck. Abbey Theatre, I smell the pubic sweat of monks. He spat blank. Forgot, any more than he forgot the whipping lousy Lucy gave him, and left the femme de 30 ans. And why no other children born, and his first child a girl? Afterwit, go back. The door recluse there, he has his cake, and the deuce youngling, minion of pleasure, Fido's toyable fair hair. I just, wanted, I forgot, Longworth and McCurdy Atkinson were there. Puck Mulligan footed featly, trilling. I hardly hear the poor low cry, or a Tommy talk as I pass one by, before my thoughts begin to run on F. McCurdy Atkinson. The same that had the wooden leg and that filibustering filibeg that never dared to slake his drouth, Maggie that had the chinless mouth. Being afraid to marry on earth, they masturbated for all they were worth. Jest on, know thyself. Halted, below me, a quizzer looks at me. I halt. Mournful mummer, Buck Mulligan moaned. Singe has left off wearing black to be like nature. Only crows, priests, and English coal are black. A laugh tripped over his lips. Longworth is awfully sick, he said, after what you wrote about that old hate Gregory. Oh, you inquisitional drunken Jew Jesuit. She gets you a job on the paper and then you go and Slater drivel to Jesus. Couldn't you do the Yeats touch? He went on and down, mopping, chanting with waving graceful arms. The most beautiful book that has come out of our country in my time. One thinks of Homer. He stopped at the stair foot. I have conceived a play for the mummers, he said solemnly. The pillared Moorish hall, shadows entwined, gone the 9 men's Morris with caps of indices. In sweetly varying voices, Buck Mulligan read his tablet. Every man his own wife, or A Honeymoon in the Hand, A National Immorality in 3 Orgasms, by Balaky Mulligan. He turned a happy patches smirk to Stefan, saying, The disguise, I fear, is thin, but listen. He read, Marcado. Characters? Toady Tostoff, a ruined Pole. Crab, a bushranger. Medical Dick and Medical Davy, 2 birds with 1 stone. Mother Grogan, a water carrier. Fresh Nelly and Rosalie, the Colquay whore. He laughed, lolling a to and fro head, walking on, followed by Stefan, and mirthfully he told the shadows, souls of men. Oh, the night in the Camden halls when the daughters of Erin had to lift their skirts to step over you as you lay in your mulberry-colored, multicolored, multitudinous vomit. The most innocent son of Erin, Stefan said, for whom they ever lifted them. About to pass through the doorway, feeling one behind, he stood aside. Part, the moment is now, where then? If Socrates leave his house today, if Judas go forth tonight, why? That lies in space which I and time must come to ineluctably. My will, his will that fronts me, sees between. A man passed out between them, bowing, greeting. Good day again, Buck Mulligan said. The Portigo. Here I watch the birds for augury, Angus of the birds. They go, they come. Last night I flew, easily flew. Men wandered. Street of harlots after. A cream fruit melon he held to me. In, you will see. The wandering Jew, Buck Mulligan whispered with clown's awe. Did you see his eye? He looked upon you to lust after you. I fear thee, ancient mariner. Oh, Kinch, thou art in peril. Get thee a breech pad. Manor of Oxenford, day, wheelbarrow, sun over the arch of bridge. A dark back went before them, a step of a pard, down, out by the gateway, under portcullis barbs. They followed. Offend me still, speak on. Kind air defined the coins of houses in Kildare Street. No birds, frail from the housetops, 2 plumes of smoke ascended, pluming, and in a flaw of softness softly were blown. Cease to strive, peace of the Druid priests of Cymbeline, hierophantic from wide earth and altar. Laud we the gods, and let our crooked smokes climb to their nostrils from our blessed altars. The superior, the very reverend John Conmee, S.J., reset his smooth watch in his interior pocket as he came down the presbytery steps. 5 to 3, just nice time to walk to Artane. What was that boy's name again? Dignam. Yes, vera dignam et iustum est. Brother Swan was the person to see. Mr. Cunningham's letter. Yes, oblige him, if possible. Good, practical Catholic, useful at mission time. A 1-legged sailor, swinging himself onward by lazy jerks of his crutches, growled some notes. He jerked short before the convent of the Sisters of Charity, and held out a peaked cap for alms towards the very Reverend John Conmee, S.J., Father Conmee, blessed him and the son for his purse held, he knew, 1 silver crown. Father Conmee crossed to Mountjoy Square. He thought, but not for long, of soldiers and sailors whose legs had been shot off by the cannonballs, ending their days in some pauper ward, and of Cardinal Wolsey's words, If I had served my God as I have served my king, he would not have abandoned me in my old days. He walked by the tree shade of sunny winking leaves, and towards him came the wife of Mr. David Sheehy, M.P. Very well, indeed, father. And you, father? Father Conmee was wonderfully well indeed. He would go to Buxton probably for the waters. And her boys, were they getting on well at Belvedere? Was that so? Father Conmee was very glad indeed to hear that. And Mr. Sheehy himself? Still in London? The house was still sitting, to be sure it was. Beautiful weather it was, delightful indeed. Yes, it was very probable that Father Bernard Vaughan would come again to preach. Oh yes, a very great success. A wonderful man, really. Father Conmee was very glad to see the wife of Mr. David Sheehy, M.P., looking so well, and he begged to be remembered to Mr. David Sheehy, M.P. Yes, he would certainly call. Good afternoon, Miss Sheehy. Father Conmee doffed his silk hat and smiled as he took leave at the jet beads of her mantilla ink shining in the sun. and smiled yet again in going. He had cleaned his teeth, he knew, with arecanut paste. Father Conmee walked, and walking, smiled, for he thought on Father Bernard Vaughan's droll eyes and cockney voice. Pilata, why don't you hold back with that owlin' mob? A zealous man, however, really he was, and really did great good in his way. Beyond a doubt, he loved Ireland, he said, and he loved the Irish. Of good family, too, would one think it. Welsh, were they not? Oh, lest he forget that leather to Father Provincial. Father Conmee stopped 3 little schoolboys at the corner of Mountjoy Square. Yes, they were from Belvedere, the little house. Aha. And were they good boys at school? Oh, that was very good now. And what was his name? Jack Sohan. And his name? Ger Gallagher. And the other little man? His name was Bruni Lenham. Oh, that was a very nice name to have. Father Conmee gave a letter from his breast to Master Bruni Lenham, and pointed to the red pillar box at the corner of Fitzgibbon Street. But mind you don't post yourself into the box, little man, he said. The boys six-eyed Father Conmee and laughed. Oh, sir. Well, let me see if you can post the letter, Father Conmee said. Master Bruni Lenham ran across the road and put Father Conmee's letter to Father Provincial into the mouth of the bright red letter box. Father Conmee smiled and nodded, and smiled and walked along Mountjoy Square East. Mr. Dennis J. McGinney, professor of dancing, and in a silk hat, slate frock coat with silk facings, white kerchief tie, tight lavender trousers, canary gloves, and pointed patent boots, walked with grave deportment, most respectfully took the curbstone as he passed Lady Maxwell at the corner of Digham's Court. Was that not Mrs. McGinnis? Mrs. McGinnis, stately, silver-haired, bowed to Father Conmee from the farther footpath along which she sailed. And Father Conmee smiled and saluted. How did she do? A fine carriage she had, like Mary, Queen of Scots, something. And to think she was a pawnbroker. Well now, such a, what would he say? Such a queenly mien. Father Conmee walked down Great Charles Street and glanced at the shut-up Free Church on his left. The Reverend T.R. Green, B.A., Will, D.V., speak. The incumbent, they called him. He felt it incumbent on him to say a few words, but one should be charitable. Invincible ignorance. They acted according to their lights. Father Conmee turned the corner and walked along the North Circular Road. It was a wonder that there was not a tram line in such an important thoroughfare. Surely there ought to be. A band of satcheled schoolboys crossed from Richmond Street. All raised untidy caps. Father Conmee greeted them more than once benignly, Christian brother boys. Father Conmee smelt incense on his right hand as he walked, St. Joseph's Church, Portland Row, for aged and virtuous females. Father Conmee raised his hat to the Blessed Sacrament, virtuous, but occasionally they were also bad-tempered. Near Aldborough House, Father Conmee thought of that spendthrift nobleman, and now it was an office or something. Father Conmee began to walk along the North Strand Road and was saluted by Mr. William Gallagher, who stood in the doorway of his shop. Father Conmee saluted Mr. William Gallagher and perceived the odors that came from bacon flitches and ample cools of butter. He passed Grogan's, the tobacconist against which newsboards leaned and told of a dreadful catastrophe in New York. In America, those things were continually happening. Unfortunate people to die like that, unprepared. Still an act of perfect contrition. Father Conmee went by Daniel Bergen's public house, against the window of which 2 unlaboring men lounged. They saluted him, and were saluted. Father Conmee passed H.J. O'Neill's funeral establishment, where Corny Kelleher totted figures in the day book while he chewed a blade of hay. A constable on his beat saluted Father Conmee, and Father Conmee saluted the constable. In Euxtetter's, the pork butcher's, Father Conmee observed pigs' puddings, white and black and red, lie neatly curled in tubes. Moored under the trees of Charleville Mall, Father Conmee saw a turf barge, a tow horse with pendant head, a bargeman with a hat of dirty straw seated amidships, smoking and staring at a branch of poplar above him. It was idyllic, and Father Conmee reflected on the providence of the Creator who made turf to be in bogs whence men might dig it out and bring it to town and hamlet to make fires in the houses of poor people. On Newcomen Bridge, the very Reverend John Conmee, S.J. of St. Francis Xavier's Church, Upper Gardner Street, stepped onto an outward-bound tram. Off an inward-bound tram stepped the Reverend Nicholas Dudley, C.C. of St. Agatha's Church, North William Street, on to Newcomen Bridge. At Newcomen Bridge, Father Conmee stepped into an outward-bound tram, for he disliked to traverse on foot the dingy way past Mud Island. Father Conmee sat in a corner of the tramcar, a blue ticket tucked with care in the eye of one plump kid glove, while 4 shillings, a 6pence, and 5 pennies shooted from his other plump glove palm into his purse. Passing the Ivy Church, he reflected that the ticket inspector usually made his visit when one had carelessly thrown away the ticket. The solemnity of the occupants of the car seemed to Father Conmee excessive for a journey so short and cheap. Father Conmee liked cheerful decorum. It was a peaceful day. The gentleman with the glasses opposite Father Conmee had finished explaining and looked down. His wife, Father Conmee supposed. A tiny yawn opened the mouth of the wife of the gentleman with the glasses. She raised her small gloved fist, yawned ever so gently, tip-tapping her small gloved fist on her opening mouth, and smiling tenderly, sweetly. Father Conmee perceived her perfume in the car. He perceived also that the awkward man at the other side of her was sitting on the edge of the seat. Father Conmee at the altar rails placed the host with difficulty in the mouth of the awkward old man who had the shaky head. At Annesley Bridge, the tram halted, and when it was about to go, an old woman rose suddenly from her place to alight. The conductor pulled the bell strap to stay the car for her. She passed out with her basket and a market net, and Father Conmee saw the conductor help her and net and basket down. And Father Conmee thought that, as she had nearly passed the end of the penny fare, she was one of those good souls who had always had to be told twice, "Bless you, my child," that they had been absolved, "Pray for me." But they had so many worries in life, so many cares, poor creatures. From the hoardings, Mr. Eugene Stratton grimaced with thick nigger lips at Father Conmee. Father Conmee thought of the souls of black and brown and yellow men, and of his sermon on St. Peter Claver, S.J., and the African mission, and of the propagation of the faith, and of the millions of black and brown and yellow souls that had not received the baptism of water when their last hour came like a thief in the night. That book, by the Belgian Jesuit, Le Nombre d'Elus, seemed to Father Conmee a reasonable plea. Those were millions of human souls created by God in his own likeness, to whom the faith had not been brought. But they were God's souls, created by God. It seemed to Father Conmee a pity that they should all be lost, a waste, if one might say. At the Howth Road stop, Father Conmee alighted, was saluted by the conductor, and saluted in his turn. The Malahide Road was quiet. It pleased Father Conmee, road and name. The joy bells were ringing in gay Malahide. Lord Talbot de Malahide, immediate hereditary Lord Admiral of the Malahide and the seas adjoining. Then came the call to arms, and she was maid, wife, and widow in one day. Those were old worldish days, loyal times in joyous townlands, old times in the barony. Father Conmee, walking, thought of his little book, Old Times in the Barony, and of the book that might be written about the Jesuit houses, and of Mary Rochfort, daughter of Lord Molesworth, first Countess of Belvedere. A listless lady, no more young, walked alone the shore of La Fenelle. Mary, first Countess of Belvedere, listlessly walking in the evening, not startled when an otter plunged. Who could know the truth? Not the jealous Lord Belvedere, and not her confessor, if she had not committed adultery fully. Ejaculatio siminis inter vas naturala mulieres, with her husband's brother? She would half confess if she had not all sinned as women did. Only God knew, and she and he, her husband's brother. Father Conmee thought of that tyrannous incontinence, needed, however, for man's race on earth, and of the ways of God which were not our ways. Don John Conmee walked and moved in times of yore. He was humane and honored there. He bore in mind secrets confessed, and he smiled at smiling noble faces in a beeswaxed drawing-room, sealed with full fruit clusters. In the hands of a bride and of a bridegroom, noble to noble, were empalmed by Don John Conmee. It was a charming day. The lich gate of a field showed Father Conmee breadths of cabbages, curtsying to him with ample underleaves. The sky showed him a flock of small white clouds, going slowly down the wind. Moltenaire, the French said, a just and homely word. Father Conmee, reading his office, watched a flock of muttoning clouds over Rath Coffee. His thin-socked ankles were tickled by the stubble of Clongowes Field. He walked there, reading in the evening, and heard the cries of the boys' line at their play. young cries in the quiet evening. He was their rector, his reign was mild. Father Conmee drew off his gloves and took off his rededged breviary out. An ivory bookmark told him the page. Nuns, he should have read that before lunch, but Lady Maxwell had come. Father Conmee read in secret Pater and Ave, and crossed his breast, Deus and Auditorium. He walked calmly and read mutely the nuns, walking and reading till he came to Res and Beati Immaculati. Principium verbarum torum veritas in aeternum omnia indicia stute tue. A flushed young man came from a gap of a hedge, and after him came a young woman with wild nodding daisies in her hand. The young man raised his cap abruptly. The young woman abruptly bent and with slow care detached from her light skirt a clinging twig. Father Conmee blessed both gravely and turned a thin page of his breviary. Sen, principis perseciti sunt mi gratis, et a verbis tuis formidavit cor meum. Corny Kelleher closed his long day book and glanced with his drooping eye at a pine coffin lid sentried in a corner. He pulled himself erect and went to it, spinning it on its axle, viewed its shape and brass finishings. Chewing his blade of hay, he laid the coffin lid by and came to the doorway. There he tilted his hat brim to give shade to his eyes and leaned against the doorcase, looking idly out. Father John Conmee stepped into the Dollymount tram on Newcomen Bridge. Corny Kelleher locked his large-footed boots and gazed, his hat down-tilted, chewing his blade of hay. Constable 57C, on his beat, stood to pass the time of the day. "That's a fine day, Mr. Kelleher." "Aye," Corny Kelleher said. "It's very close," the constable said. Corny Kelleher sped a silent jet of hay juice arching from his mouth, while a generous white arm from a window in Eccles Street flung forth a coin. "What's the best news?" he asked. "I seen a particular party last evening," the constable said with bated breath. A one-legged sailor crutched himself round McConnell's corner, skirting Rabiotti's ice cream bar, and jerked himself up Eccles Street. Towards Larry O'Rourke in shirt sleeves in his doorway he growled unamiably, "For England!" He swung himself violently forward, past Katy and Booty Daedalus, halted and growled, "Home and beauty!" J.J. O'Malloy's white, careworn face was told that Mr. Lambert was in the warehouse with a visitor. A stout lady stopped, took a copper coin from her purse, and dropped it into the cap held out to her. The sailor grumbled, "Thanks," glanced sourly at the unheeding windows, sank his head, and swung himself forward 4 strides. He halted and growled angrily, "For England!" 2 barefoot urchins, sucking long licorice laces, halted near him, gaping at his stump with their yellow slobbered mouths. He swung himself forward in vigorous jerks, halted, lifted his head towards a window, and bayed deeply, "Home and beauty." The gay, sweet, chirping, whistling within went on a bar or two, ceased. The blind of the window was drawn aside. A card, "Unfurnished Apartments," slipped from the sash and fell. A plump, bare, generous arm shone, was seen, held forth from a white petticoat bodice and taut shift straps. A woman's hand flung forth a coin over the area railings. It fell on the path. One of the urchins ran to it, picked it up, and dropped it into the minstrel's cap, saying, "There, sir." Katy and Booty Daedalus shoved in the door of the close-steaming kitchen. "Did you put in the books?" Booty asked. Maggie at the range rammed down a grayish mass beneath bubbling suds twice with her pot stick and wiped her brow. "They wouldn't give anything on them," she said. Father Conmee walked through Clongow's field, his thin-socked ankles tickled by stubble. "Where did you try?" Booty asked. "McGinnis's." Booty stamped her foot and threw a satchel on the table. "Bad cess to her big face," she cried. Katy went to the range and peered with squinting eyes. "What's in the pot?" she asked. "Shirts," Maggie said. Booty cried angrily, "Creaky, is there nothing for us to eat?" Katy, lifting the kettle lid in a pad of her stained skirt, asked, "And what's in this?" A heavy fume gushed in answer. "Pea soup," Maggie said. "Where did you get it?" Katy asked. "Sister Mary Patrick," Maggie said. The lackey rang his bell. Barang! Booty sat down at the table and said hungrily, "Give us it here." Maggie poured yellow thick soup from the kettle into a bowl. Katy, sitting opposite Booty, said quietly, as her fingertip lifted to her mouth random crumbs. Good job we have that much. Where's Dilly? Gone to meet father, Maggie said. Booty, breaking big chunks of bread into the yellow soup, added, Our Father who art not in heaven. Maggie, pouring yellow soup in Katie's bowl, exclaimed, Booty, for shame. A skiff, a crumpled throwaway, Elijah is coming, rode lightly down the Liffey, under a loop-lined bridge, shooting the rapids where water chafed around the bridge piers, sailing eastward past hulls and anchor chains, between the custom house, Old Dock, and George's Quay. The blonde girl in Thornton's bedded the wicker basket with rustling fiber. Blazes Boylan handed her the bottle, swathed in pink tissue paper and a small jar. Put these in first, will you? He said. Yes, sir, the blonde girl said, and the fruit on top. That'll do, game ball, Blazes Boylan said. She bestowed fat pears neatly, head by tail, and among them, ripe, shame-faced peaches. Blazes Boylan walked here and there in new tan shoes about the fruit-smelling shop, lifting fruits, young, juicy, crinkled, and plump red tomatoes, sniffing smells. Helys filed before him, tall, white-hatted, past Tangier Lane, plodding towards their goal. He turned suddenly from a chip of strawberries, drew a gold watch from his fob, and held it at its chain length. Can you send them by tram, now? A dark-backed figure under Merchant's Ark scanned books on the hawker's cart. Certainly, sir. Is it in the city? Oh, yes, Blazes Boylan said. 10 minutes. The blonde girl handed him a docket and pencil. Will you write the address, sir? Blazes Boylan at the counter wrote and pushed the docket to her. Send it at once, will you? He said. It's for an invalid. Yes, sir. I will, sir. Blazes Boylan rattled merry money in his trousers pocket. What's the damage? He asked. The blonde girl's slim fingers reckoned the fruits. Blazes Boylan looked into the cut of her blouse. A young pullet. He took a red carnation from the tall stem glass. This for me? He asked gallantly. The blonde girl glanced sideways at him, got up regardless, with his tie a bit crooked, blushing. Yes, sir, she said. Bending arcly, she reckoned again fat pears and blushing peaches. Blazes Boylan looked in her blouse with more favor, the stalk of a red flower between his smiling teeth. May I say a word to your telephone, missy? He asked roguishly. Ma, Almadano Artifoni said. He gazed over Stefan's shoulder at Goldsmith's knobby pole. 2 carfuls of tourists passed slowly, their women sitting 4, gripping the handrests. Pale faces, men's arms frankly round their stunted forms. They looked from Trinity to the blind columned porch of the Bank of Ireland where pigeons were cuckooed. Anch'io ho avuto di queste idee, Almadano Artifoni said. Quand'ero giovine come lei, el poi mi sono convinta che il mondo è una bestia. E peccato, perché la sua voce sarebbe un cespita di rendita via. Invece, lei si sacrifica. Sacrificio incruento, Stefan said, swaying his ash plant in slow swing song from its mild point lightly. Speriamo, the round mustachioed face said pleasantly. Ma diaretta a mi, ci rifletta. By the stern stone hand of Graton, bidding halt, an inch-core tram unloaded straggling Highland soldiers of a band. Ci rifletterò, Stefan said, glancing down the solid trouser leg. Ma sul serio, eh? Almedano Artifoni said. His heavy hand took Stefan's firmly, human eyes. They gazed curiously an instant and turned quickly towards a dalky tram. Eccolo, Almedano Artifoni said in friendly haste. Venga a trovarvi e ci pensi. Addio, caro. Arrivederle, maestro, Stefan said, raising his hat when his hand was freed. E grazie. Dice? Almedano Artifoni said. Scusi, tante belle cose. Almedano Artifoni, holding up a baton of rolled music as a signal, trotted on stout trousers after the dalky tram. In vain he trotted, signaling in vain among the rout of bare-kneed gillies, smuggling implements of music through Trinity gates. Miss Dunn hid the Capel Street Library copy of The Woman in White far back in her drawer and rolled a sheet of gaudy notepaper into her typewriter. Too much mystery business in it. Is he in love with that one, Marion? Change it and get another by Mary Cecil Hay. The disc shot down the groove, wobbled a while, ceased, and ogled them. 6. Miss Dunn clicked on the keyboard. 16th of June, 1904. 5 tall white-hatted sandwichmen between Moneypenny's corner and the slab where Wolf-Tone's statue was not, eeled themselves, turning HELYS's, and plodded back as they had come. Then she stared at the large poster of Mary Kendall, charming soubrette, and listlessly lolling, scribbled on the jotter's 16s and capital S's. Mustard hair and dauby cheeks. She's not nice looking, is she? The way she's holding up a bit of her skirt. Wonder will that fellow be at the band tonight? If I could get that dressmaker to make a concertina skirt like Susie Nagel's, they kick out grand. Shannon and all the boat club swells never took his eyes off her. Hope to goodness he won't keep me here till 7. The telephone rang rudely by her ear. Hello? Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, sir. I'll ring them up after 5. Only those 2, sir, for Belfast and Liverpool? All right, sir. Then I can go after 6 if you're not back. A quarter after. Yes, sir. 27 and 6. I'll tell him. Yes. 1, 7, 6. She scribbled 3 figures on an envelope. Mr. Boylan, hello. That gentleman from Sport was in looking for you, Mr. Linehan said. He said he'll be in Ormond at 4. No, sir. Yes, sir. I'll ring them up after 5. 2 pink faces turned in the flare of the tiny torch. Who's that? Ned Lambert asked. Is that Crotty? Ringabella and Crosshaven, a voice replied, groping for foothold. Hello, Jack, is that yourself? Ned Lambert said, raising in salute his pliant lath among the flickering arches. Come on, mind your steps there. The Vesta and the clergyman's uplifted hand consumed itself in a long, soft flame and was let fall. At their feet its red speck died, and moldy air closed around them. How interesting, a refined accent set in the gloom. Yes, sir, Ned Lambert said heartily. We are standing in the historic council chamber of St. Mary's Abbey, where Silken Thomas proclaimed himself a rebel in 1534. This is the most historic spot in all Dublin. O'Madden Burke is going to write something about it one of these days. The old Bank of Ireland was over the way till the time of the Union, and the original Jews' temple was here too before they built their synagogue over in Adelaide Road. You were never here before, Jack, were you? No, Ned. He rode down through Dame Walk. The refined accent said, if my memory serves me, the mansion of the Kildares was in Thomas Court. That's right, Ned Lambert said. That's quite right, sir. If you'll be so kind, then, the clergyman said, the next time to allow me perhaps... Certainly, Ned Lambert said. Bring the camera whenever you like. I'll get those bags cleared away from the windows. You can take it from here or from there. In the still faint light, he moved about, tapping with his lath the piled sea bags and points of vantage on the floor. From a long face, a beard and gaze hung on a chessboard. I'm deeply obliged, Mr. Lambert, the clergyman said. I won't trespass on your valuable time. You're welcome, sir, Ned Lambert said. Drop in whenever you like. Next week, say. Can you see? Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Lambert said. Very pleased to have met you. Pleasure is mine, sir, Ned Lambert answered. He followed his guest to the outlet and then whirled his lath way among the pillars. With J.J. O'Malloy, he came forth slowly into Mary's Abbey, where dray men were loading floats with sacks of carob and palm nut meal, O'Connor Wexford. He stood to read the card in his hand, the Reverend Hugh C. Love, Rathcoffey. Present address, St. Michael's, Salins. Nice young chap he is. He's writing a book about the Fitzgerald, he told me. He's well up in history, faith. The young woman with slow care detached from her light skirt a clinging twig. I thought you were at new gunpowder plot, J.J. O'Malloy said. Ned Lambert cracked his fingers in the air. God, he cried, I forgot to tell him that one about the Earl of Kildare after he set fire to Cashel Cathedral. You know that one? I'm bloody sorry I did it, says he, but I declare to God I thought the Archbishop was inside. He mightn't like it, though. What? God, I'll tell him anyhow. That was the great Earl, the Fitzgerald Moore. Hot members they were, all of them, the Geraldines. The horses he passed started nervously under their slack harness. He slapped the piebald haunch quivering near him and cried, Whoa, sonny. He turned to J.J. O'Malloy and asked, Well, Jack, what is it? What's the trouble? Wait a while, hold hard. With gaping mouth and head far back, he stood still, and after an instant sneezed loudly. Chow, he said, blast you. The dust from those sacks, J.J. O'Malloy said politely. No, Ned Lambert gasped. I caught a cold night before. Blast your soul. Night before last, and there was a hell of a lot of draught. He held his handkerchief ready for the coming. I was Glasnevin this morning. Poor little, what do you call him? Chow! Mother of Moses. Tom Rochford took the top disc from the pile he clasped against his claret waistcoat. See, he said. Say it's turn 6. In here, see, turn now on. He slid it into the left slot for them. It shot down the groove, wobbled a while, ceased, ogling them. 6. Lawyers of the past, haughty, pleading, beheld pass from the Consolidated Taxing Office to Nizzy Prius Court, Richie Golding carrying the cost bag of Golding, Collis, and Ward, and heard rustling from the Admiralty Division of King's Beach to the Court of Appeal, an elderly female with false teeth, smiling incredulously, and a black silk skirt of great amplitude. See, he said. See now, the last one I put in is over here. Turns over, the impact, leverage, see? He showed them the rising column of discs on the right. Smart idea, Nosey Flynn said, snuffling. So a fellow coming in late can see what turn is on, and what turns are over. See? Tom Rochford said. He slid in a disc for himself and watched it shoot, wobble, ogle, stop. 4. Turn now on. I see him now in the Orman, Linehan said, and sound him. One good turn deserves another. Do, Tom Rochford said. Tell him I'm boiling with impatience. Good night, McCoy said abruptly, when you two begin. Nosey Flynn stooped towards the lever, snuffling at it. But how does it work here, Tommy? He asked. Tooraloo, Linehan said. See you later. He followed McCoy out across the tiny square of Crampton Court. He's a hero, he said simply. I know, McCoy said. The drain, you mean? Drain? Linehan said. It was down a manhole. They passed Dan Lowry's music hall, where Mary Kendall, charming soubrette, smiled on them from a poster, a Dobby smile. Going down the path of Sycamore Street beside the Empire Music Hall, Linehan showed McCoy how the whole thing was. One of those manholes like a bloody gas pipe, and there was the poor devil stuck down in it, half choked with sewer gas. Down went Tom Rochford anyhow, bookie's vest and all, with the rope round him. And be damned, but he got the rope round the poor devil and the two were hauled up. The act of a hero, he said. At the Dolphin, they halted to allow the ambulance car to gallop past them for Jervis Street. This way, he said, walking to the right. I want to pop into Linham's to see Scepter's starting price. What's the time by your gold watch and chain? McCoy peered into Marcus Tertius Moses' somber office, then at O'Neill's clock. After 3, he said. Who's riding her? Oh, Madden, Linehan said, and a game filly she is. While he waited in Temple Bar, McCoy dodged a banana peel with gentle pushes of his toe from the path to the gutter. Fellow might damn easy get a nasty fall there, coming along tight in the dark. The gates of the drive opened wide to give egress to the vice-regal cavalcade. Even money, Linehan said, returning. I knocked against Bantam Lions, in there, going back a bloody horse someone gave him. That hasn't an earthly. Through here. They went up the steps and under Merchant's Ark. A dark-backed figure scanned books on the hawker's cart. There he is, Linehan said. Wonder what he's buying, McCoy said, glancing behind. Leopoldo, or the Bloom is on the rye, Linehan said. He's dead nuts on sales, McCoy said. I was with him one day, and he bought a book from an old one in Liffey Street for 2 bob. There were fine plates in it, worth double the money, and stars and moons and comets with long tails. Astronomy, it was about. Linehan laughed. I'll tell you a damn good one about comets' tails, he said. Come over in the sun. They crossed to the metal bridge and went along Wellington Quay by the river wall. Master Patrick Aloysius Dignam came out of Mangan's, late Fehrenbach's, carrying 1.5 pounds of pork steaks. There was a long spread out at Glencree Reformatory, Linehan said eagerly. The annual dinner, you know. Boiled shirt affair. The Lord Mayor was there. Val Dillon, it was. And Sir Charles Cameron and Dan Dawson spoke, and there was music. Bartell D'Arcy sang and Benjamin Dollard. I know, McCoy broke in. My missus sang there once. Did she? Linehan said. A card, Unfurnished Apartments, reappeared on the window sash of number 7 Eccles Street. He checked his tail a moment, but broke out in a wheezy laugh. But wait till I tell you, he said. Delahunt of Camden Street had the catering, and yours truly was chief bottle washer. Bloom and the wife were there, lashings of stuff we put up, port wine and sherry, and curacao, to which we did ample justice. Fast and furious it was. After liquids came solids, cold joints galore, and mince pies. I know, McCoy said, the year the missus was there. Linehan linked his arm warmly. But wait till I tell you, he said. We had a midnight lunch, too, after the jollification. And when we sallied forth, it was blue o'clock in the morning after the night before. Coming home, it was a gorgeous winter's night on the Featherbed Mountain. Bloom and Chris Callahan were on the one side of the car, and I was with the wife on the other. We started singing glees and duets, lo, the early beam of morning. She was well primed with a good load of Delahunt's port under her belly band. Every jolt the bloody car gave, I had her bumping up against me. Hell's delights. She was a fine pair, God bless her, like that. He held his caved hands a cubit from him, frowning. I was tucking the rug under her and settling her boa all the time, know what I mean? His hands molded ample curves of air. He shut his eyes tight in delight, his body shrinking, and blew a sweet chirp from his lips. The lad stood to attention anyhow, he said with a sigh. She's a gamey mare, and no mistake. Bloom was pointing out all the stars and the comets in the heaven to Chris Callanan and the Jarvey. The Great Bear and Hercules and the Dragon and the whole jing-bang lot. But by God, I was lost, so to speak, in the Milky Way. He knows them all, faith. At last, she spotted a weeny-weeshy 1 mile away. And what star is that, Poldy? Says she. By God, she had Bloom cornered. That one, is it? Says Chris Callanan. Sure, that's only what you might call a pinprick. By God, he wasn't far wide off the mark. Linehan stopped and leaned on the river wall, panting with soft laughter. I'm weak, he gasped. McCoy's white face smiled about it, at instants, and grew grave. Linehan walked on again. He lifted his yachting cap and scratched his hind head rapidly. He glanced sideways in the sunlight at McCoy. He's a cultured all-roundman, Bloom is, he said seriously. He's not one of your common or garden. You know, there's a touch of the artist about old Bloom. Mr. Bloom turned over idly pages of the awful disclosures of Maria Monk, then of Aristotle's masterpiece. Crooked botched print. Plates, infants cuddled in a ball and blood-red wombs like livers of slaughtered cows. Lots of them, like that at this moment all over the world. All budding with their skulls to get out of it, child-born every minute somewhere, Miss Purefoy. He laid both books aside and glanced at the third, Tales of the Ghetto, by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. That I had, he said, pushing it by. The shopman let 2 volumes fall on the counter. Them are 2 good ones, he said. Onions of his breath came across the counter out of his ruined mouth. He bent to make a bundle of the other books, hugged them against his unbuttoned waistcoat, and bore them off behind the dingy curtain. On O'Connell Bridge, many persons observed the grey deportment and gay apparel of Mr. Dennis J. Magany, professor of dancing and co. Mr. Bloom, alone, looked at the titles. Fair Tyrants by James Love Birch. Know the kind, that is? Had it? Yes. He opened it. Thought so. A woman's voice behind the dingy curtain. Listen, the man. No, she wouldn't like that much. Got her at once. He read the other title, Sweets of Sin. More in her line, let us see. He read where his finger opened. All the dollar bills her husband gave her were spent in the stores on wondrous gowns and costliest frillies. For him, for Rao. Yes, this. Here, try. Her mouth glued on his in a luscious, voluptuous kiss, while his hands felt for the opulent curves inside her dashabill. Yes, take this, the end. You are late, he spoke hoarsely, eyeing her with a suspicious glare. The beautiful woman threw off her sable-trimmed wrap, displaying her queenly shoulders and heavy embonpoint. An imperceptible smile played round her perfect lips as she turned to him calmly. Mr. Bloom read again, The beautiful woman. Warmth showered gently over him, cowing his flesh. Flesh yielded amply amid rumpled clothes, whites of eyes swooning up. His nostrils arched themselves for prey. Melting breast ointments, for him, for Rao. Armpits, oniony sweat, fish-gluey slime, her heaving embonpoint. Feel, press, crushed, sulphur dung of lions. Young, young. An elderly female, no more young, left the building of the Courts of Chancery, King's Beach, Exchequer, and Common Pleas, having heard in the Lord Chancellor's Court the case in lunacy of Potterton. In the Admiralty Division, the summons, ex parte motion, of the owners of the Lady Cairns versus the owners of the Bark Mona. In the Court of Appeal, reservation of judgment in the case of Harvey versus the Ocean Accident and Guarantee Corporation. Phlegmy coughs shook the air of the bookshop, bulging out of the dingy curtains. The shopman's uncombed gray head came out, and his unshaven, reddened face coughing. He raked his throat rudely, puked phlegm on the floor, then put his boot on what he had spat out, wiping his sole along it, and bent, showing a raw-skinned crown, scantily haired. Mr. Bloom beheld it. Mastering his troubled breath, he said, "I'll take this one." The shopman lifted eyes, bleared with old rheum. "Sweets of Sin," he said, tapping on it. "That's a good one." The lackey by the door of Dillon's auction rooms shook his handbell twice again and viewed himself in the chalked mirror of the cabinet. Dilly Daedalus, loitering by the curbstone, heard the beats of the bell, the cries of the auctioneer within. 4 and 9, those lovely curtains. 5 shillings, cozy curtains, selling new at 2 guineas. Any advance on 5 shillings? Going for 5 shillings? The lackey lifted his handbell and shook it. Barang! Bang of the last lap bell spurred the half-mile wheelmen to their sprint. J.A. Jackson, W.E. Wiley, A. Monroe, and H.T. Gahan, their stretched necks wagging, negotiated the curve by the college library. Mr. Daedalus, tugging a long mustache, came round from Williams Row. He halted near his daughters. "It's time for you," she said. "Stand up straight for the love of the Lord Jesus," Mr. Daedalus said. "Are you trying to imitate your Uncle John, the cornet player, head upon shoulder? Melancholy God." Dilly shrugged her shoulders. Mr. Daedalus placed his hands on them and held them back. "Stand up straight, girl," he said. "You'll get curvature of the spine. Do you know what you look like?" He let his head sink suddenly down and forward, hunching his shoulders and dropping his underjaw. "Give it up, father," Dilly said. "All the people are looking at you." Mr. Daedalus drew himself upright and tugged again at his mustache. "Did you get any money?" Dilly asked. "Where would I get money?" Mr. Daedalus said. "There's no one in Dublin would lend me 4 pence. "You got some," Dilly said, looking in his eyes. "How do you know that?" Mr. Daedalus asked, his tongue in his cheek. Mr. Kernan, pleased with the order he had booked, walked boldly along James Street. "I know you did," Dilly said. "Were you up in the Scotch House now?" "I was not, then," Mr. Daedalus said, smiling. "Was it the little nuns that taught you to be so saucy? Here." He handed her a shilling. "See if you can do anything with that," he said. "I suppose you got 5, Dilly said. "Give me more than that." "Wait a while," Mr. Daedalus said threateningly. "You're like the rest of them, are you? An insolent pack of little bitches since your poor mother died? But wait a while. You'll all get a short shrift and a long day from me. Low blackguardism, I'm going to get rid of you. Wouldn't care if I was stretched out stiff. He's dead. The man upstairs is dead." He left her and walked on. Dilly followed quickly and pulled his coat. "Well, what is it?" he said, stopping. The lackey rang his bell behind their backs. Brang! "Close your bloody blatant soul," Mr. Daedalus cried, turning on him. The lackey, aware of comment, shook the lolling capper of his bell, but feebly. Bang! Mr. Daedalus stared at him. "Watch him," he said. "It's instructive. I wonder, will he allow us to talk?" "You got more than that, father," Dilly said. "I'm going to show you a little trick," Mr. Daedalus said. "I'll leave you all where Jesus left the Jews. Look, there's all I have. I got 2 shillings from Jack Power, and I spent 2 pence for a shave at the funeral." He drew forth a handful of copper coins nervously. "Can't you look for some money somewhere?" Dilly said. Mr. Daedalus thought and nodded. "I will," he said gravely. "I looked all along the gutter in O'Connell Street. I'll try this one now." "You're very funny," Dilly said, grinning. "Here," Mr. Daedalus said, handing her 2 pennies. "Get a glass of milk for yourself and a bun or something. I'll be home shortly." He put the other coins in his pocket and started to walk on. The vice-regal cavalcade passed, greeted by obsequious policemen, out of Park Gate. "I'm sure you have another shilling," Dilly said. The lackey banged loudly. Mr. Daedalus, amid the din, walked off, murmuring to himself with a pursing, mincing mouth gently. The little nuns. Nice little things. Oh, sure, they wouldn't do anything. Oh, sure, they wouldn't really. Is it little Sister Monica? From the sundial towards James Gate walked Mr. Kernan, pleased with the order he had booked for Pulbrook Robertson, boldly along James Street, past Shackleton's offices. Got round him all right. How do you do, Mr. Crimmins? First rate, sir. I was afraid you might be up in your other establishment in Pimlico. How are things going? Just keeping alive. Lovely weather we're having. Yes, indeed. Good for the country. Those farmers are always grumbling. I'll just take a thimbleful of your best gin, Mr. Crimmins. A small gin, sir. Yes, sir. Terrible affair, that General Slocum explosion. Terrible, terrible. 1,000 casualties, and heartrending scenes. Men trampling down women and children. Most brutal thing. What did they say was the cause? Spontaneous combustion. Most scandalous revelation. Not a single lifeboat would float, and the fire hose all burst. What I can't understand is how the inspectors ever allowed a boat like that. Now you're talking straight, Mr. Crimmins. You know why? Palm oil. Is that a fact? Without a doubt. Well, now, look at that. And America, they say, is the land of the free. I thought we were bad here. I smiled at him. America, I said quietly, just like that. What is it? The sweepings of every country, including our own? Isn't that true? That's a fact. Graft, my dear sir. Well, of course. Where there's money going, there's always someone to pick it up. So I'm looking at my frock coat. Dress does it. Nothing like a dressy appearance. Bowls them over. Hello, Simon, Father Cowley said. How are things? Hello, Bob, old man, Mr. Daedalus answered, stopping. Mr. Kernan halted and preened himself before the sloping mirror of Peter Kennedy, hairdresser. Stylish coat, beyond a doubt. Scott of Dawson Street. Well worth the half-sovereigns I gave Neary for it. Never built under 3 guineas. Fits me down to the ground. Some Kildare Street Club toff had it probably. John Mulligan, the manager of the Hibernian Bank, gave me a very sharp eye yesterday on Carlisle Bridge, as if he remembered me. Ahem. Must dress the character for those fellows, knights of the road, gentlemen. And now, Mr. Crimmins, may we have the honor of your custom again, sir? The cup that cheers but not inebriates, as the old saying has it. North Wall and Sir John Rogerson's quay, with hulls and anchor chains, sailing westward, sailed by a skiff, a crumpled throwaway, rocked on the ferry wash. Elijah is coming. Mr. Kernan glanced in farewell at his image, high color, of course, grizzled mustache, returned Indian officer. Bravely he bore his stumpy body forward on spatted feet, squaring his shoulders. Is that Ned Lambert's brother over the way, Sam? What? Yes. He's as like it as damn it. No, the windscreen of that motor car is in the sun there. Just a flash like that. Damn like him. Ahem. Hot spirit of juniper juice warmed his vitals and his breath. Good drop of gin, that was. His frock tails winked in bright sunshine to his fat strut. Down there Emmett was hanged, drawn and quartered. Greasy black rope. Dogs licking the blood off the street when the Lord Lieutenant's wife drove by in her naughty. Bad times those were. Well, over and done with. Great toppers, too, 4 bottlemen. Let me see, is he buried in St. Michan's, or no? There was a midnight burial in Glasnevin. Corpse brought in through a secret door in the wall.